Hey guys, Luton here, and today I'm playing this mini browser-based game, Collapse End of Society Simulator. It's to go alongside Division. It's basically like an introduction to their narrative for the Division. But it's interesting because it's a topic I've actually talked about quite a lot with friends, this idea of what happens when you have a pandemic, what happens when you end up in an apocalypse situation, when society collapses. What are some of the how does that happen? What are the kind of effects it may have? How quickly will people break down? And that's the interesting part of it. This mini little game is, as you will see, quite sort of instructional, but it's just a tiny little sort of marketing tool, really. But the interesting point to think of is how quickly society actually breaks down. It doesn't take very much at all to just spark people into turning on one another. It's actually quite terrifying, and anybody who's been in a city where that kind of thing can happen, we had the London riots, and you see the way people behave. There's been things in the past where you have kind of fuel shortages, and literally within a day people are breaking out into fights in the streets over nothing almost. So it takes very little for society to actually start to disintegrate. So the idea of having a mass pandemic, it makes a game like The Division, in terms of the way people are behaving and so on, actually more believable. But anyway, let's play on and we'll talk as we go through this. So choose a starting point. I'm going to choose a neutral location, which is near in the region of where I live in London. It's the borough, but nowhere specific. So let's just choose this. And a lot of this is based off of real stats in terms of pandemic and so on and so on. So let's make my choices about where we're going to go. Day 1. You're at home and you suddenly feel feverish. You decide to go to the hospital. I'll go to King's College Hospital. It's a large learning student hospital in a reasonable region of where I live. Paramedics are particularly exposed to the virus and are quickly infected as well. Going from one department to another, they spread the disease to other hospitals. Fact: 30 beds. There are on average only 30 hospital beds per 1,000 inhabitants. In times of crisis, your chance of getting one is almost non-existent. That source is from the World Health Organization in 2012. You can see already the virus spreading from one person to another. This was the Division's kind of random smallpox infection. Day 5. The infection is spreading fast and hospitals are now overcrowded. You're discharged with a prescription for a flu shot and need to go to the pharmacy. Fact: 6 weeks. It takes at least 6 weeks for a new batch of medication to reach pharmacy shelves. The consequences of a shortfall during a pandemic would be dramatic. Which pharmacy are we going to go to? Superdrug? Co-op pharmacy. Let's go to the Co-op. Here we go. With 1,600,000 infected people in your area, all medication is sold out before you even arrive to the Co-op pharmacy. Oh my god. Because of the dangerously increasing number of infected people, the authorities are organising vaccine distributions. You decide to go to the nearest venue. Fact: 2.4B. We're only capable of billion. We're only capable of producing 2.4 billion flu vaccines per year. Experts estimate that such a virus could spread to all 7 billion humans in just a few months. Which venue? I'll look at my choices. Last resort: the Peckham Plex Theatre Peckham or World Cinema. Let's go to the Peckham Plex and its glorious cinema with knife gates. Thousands of frightened people are amassed. There aren't enough vaccines for everyone in the Peckham Plex area. Police forced to intervene. Interestingly, this actual area was one of the places of the London riots, so it's semi-appropriate. The virus has taken its first victims and people are starting to die. The state of emergency has been declared. You decide to go to some supermarket to buy enough food so you can barricade yourself in. 3 days. The average household only stocks a maximum of 3 days worth of food provisions. We can go to Tesco Express, Asda, Iceland, Pound Stretcher, or Lidl. Let's go to Tesco Express. It seems not quite so sort of dark when you go there. Lootings is starting to take place. Food being the most stolen item. Tesco Express is. I'm just going to assume it said a shoot to kill policy. I don't think it did, but I didn't have time to read it. After emptying food supplies, looters are going after cash. Most ATMs are out of order. Riots are breaking out. Police forces are outnumbered in the East Dulwich estate area. The streets are set ablaze. I just imagining the people of East Dulwich rioting. If you know that area, then you'll know why that's funny. The city is no longer safe. You have to escape from London Heathrow. You decide to take a flight to another international destination. The reason that's funny, by the way, is because East Dulwich is like a very upper middle class area, and just the idea of like people coming out in their cardigans and fighting in the street is. Fact, 8 million people with more than 8 million passengers a day. Planes are the main catalysts of infection. Anybody who's played any of the iOS plague sort of simulator games will know that this is very true. Where are we going to go to? There are many options for us. Gibraltar, Dubai, Philadelphia, Hong Kong. Not really sure. I don't like this question because personally I wouldn't take this option. Barcelona, Paris, everywhere you want to go. Let's go to Manchester because I have family in the north, so maybe I would go and see them up there. And then you can see because of being on a flight, you then pass it to the airport, which passes it to other airports on, and you can see it quickly spreads the pandemic even further all around the world, creating more and more infection. Oh, there we go. Day 11. Flights accelerate the spread of the infection, and many countries choose to close their borders. Martial law is established as lootings and riots are now a global phenomenon. The official death toll reaches 2,665,031 people. Fact, 3.8. In 2013, there were 27,206,623 military personnel in the world. That's only 3.8 soldiers per 1,000 civilians, which is, again, kind of crazy. The situation is out of control. Law enforcement is completely overwhelmed. Soldiers are seen now abandoning their positions. Dark days. Afraid of getting killed, people stay at home. With no one to maintain the infrastructure's communication, every sort of public order and communication start to break down. Chaos is everywhere. Work absenteeism now exceeds 50%. The first nuclear power plants have stopped running. Fact. 2 days, a nuclear power plant can run for 2 days without human intervention. Then it automatically ceases to work. There's an interesting thing which I have discussed many times as well when it comes to apocalypse, and that is there are key things that would happen in a complete societal breakdown that are never addressed in survival horror sort of style games and television series and films, and it really bothers the hell out of me, and it's mainly to do with nuclear but some other factors as well. In the event of a complete societal collapse or any kind of damage to a nuclear power plant, that plant is going to potentially, the core and the reactor, it's not necessarily going to melt down. Many nuclear reactors are designed to kind of do a sort of slow shutdown period, right? But the main thing is that most nuclear power plants, they phase the extraction of the carbon rods and so on. So they actually come out and get put into cooling tanks, and then over time they just stay there, okay? And then eventually they'll be taken away to be stored long term or whatever. But most nuclear power plants have this kind of phased decommission of those rods. So they're sitting in water tanks. And so what will happen is that eventually, if there is no power or nobody there to monitor it, then the coolant will eventually stop. Once the generators stop running for the power plant, the water that is keeping those rods stable will boil away, and suddenly they'll start to burn. And when they start to burn, they're going to be venting radiation. You're going to have a lot of problems there. Now imagine I haven't got lots of stats for you, but now imagine every nuclear power plant in the world all doing that, all burning their carbon rods. Loads and loads and loads of radiation and pollution there. Absolutely appalling. And that will get into the water table, it will get into the surrounding area, it will get into wind systems and be transported and blown around all over the place. It's going to, it will cause a massive health issue and just damage to the environment. Then you've got other things like sewage refineries, okay? When they're not maintained, that can leak Okay, they can stop functioning properly. All of that can get into the water table. It will poison all of the rivers. The water will be poisonous and undrinkable from all the ammonia. So there's loads and loads of other issues that people don't consider that actually would happen in these kind of breakdowns. And those are only just the tip of the iceberg. And yet none of these things are ever addressed in survival things. Survival TVs, films, games. I would love to see a really brutal survival game where the main objective is not other people that are your threat, the main threat I should say, not other people, but the main threat is actually just keeping yourself alive from the extremely limited resources. It could be an amazing sort of game to create with a level of complexity where you really have to consider these things of like pockets of radiation, extremely poisoned water. How do you find food? How do you can it be a co-op, etc. Loads of things. I would love to see that. Anyway, it's a thing that is a chip on my shoulder, this whole apocalypse situation and how they're never kind of addressed properly, but we'll leave that. Right, let's carry on. The world shuts down on power and we go dark. The world is plunged into darkness. Except for people who have solar things. Without energy nor communication systems, the chain of command is broken. Governments are powerless. Bam, bam, bam. Fallen, fallen, fallen. And that is the end of society. You made the world collapse in 23 days, 14 hours and 21 minutes. Starting point from London. Total deaths 616,373,905. Also 1,478,000,000 infected. Interesting start point for The Division, and it's a nice little sort of mini game. I'll link it down below for anybody that wants to play through and put in their own locations, but nice little production here from Ubisoft and the guys. It's a nice little, as I say, sort of marketing tool, PR, but yeah, it's cool. It makes you think, and I say there's a lot more questions that you should be asking about these kind of societal collapses and how prepared people really are. I think a lot of the time governments are really not as well prepared as you might imagine, and that a lot of the time they just realize that if something like this were to happen, there wouldn't be a great deal they could do to really prevent it, and just kind of let people feel like, yeah, it's just going to happen if it happens. I think, all governments have their own plans and they'll try their best to sort of control and make the right decisions, but with something like an infection, it's especially if there's an incubation period where there are no symptoms, that's when you have a real issue, because you may have people transferring one place to another and not displaying any sign of infection, and then it becomes very difficult to control that and identify it, and they often look at things like human, body temperature and stuff like this, and they check people in that way, but incredibly hard to detect. So yeah, it is kind of scary, and with the fact that they keep talking about things like antibiotics are starting to fail, there's a genuine possibility that we can see like mass flu pandemics. Flu, before we actually had sort of antibiotics and other things to sort of assist with flu. I mean, flu as a virus still kills thousands of people, even in developed countries, every year. It kills the old and the young, because flu can be actually quite a horrific virus once it gets into people who have weakened immune systems or something like this, you see. So yeah, and I say, hundreds of years ago, flu really, I think there was a sort of flu pandemic, as I recall, and it killed a lot of people, like millions, I think. So, and again, I'm just literally jumping. That's something I vaguely seem to remember hearing, but yeah. Probably feel free to prove me wrong in the comments, because I know you will. But anyway, but the point is yeah, it's something that could happen again. Something as simple as flu, which people really don't consider a threat. I seem to remember that when they were talking about SARS and all these other things that were around a little while ago, but when you actually compared it to flu, I remember looking at the stats or seeing it, the flu in the UK was killing like 20 times more people. And yet that's the kind of virus that people don't really think of as being especially deadly. But it is. For the old and the young, it's very, very bad indeed. And yeah, interesting. Anyway, Division, pandemic, virus, collapse, Tell me what you think about it, guys, down in the comments below. And tell me what you think about sort of pandemics and global viral infections and how likely people would be to survive. And this idea of, like, you know, kind of how fast society breaks down and people turn on one another. What would you do in a sort of pandemic situation? What would be your course of action? Tell me down below. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time for some more Division stuff.